Hi, I'm Connie Phelps, and I serve as the co-editor of the Emporia State Research Studies Journal. I have the great pleasure of introducing the first in a series of interviews on recently published manuscripts. Today, we welcome Chris Lovett, who published On the Side of Angels, Two Kansans and the Fall of Joe McCarthy in the May 2016 Volume 51, Issue 1, edition of the Emporia State Research Studies. We welcome Michael Smith, an editorial board member, to interview Chris today. So without further ado, we welcome them to talk about this exciting article.
Today we're interviewing Professor Chris Lovett, who teaches history here at Emporia State, about his ESRS article, On the Side of Angels, Two Kansans and the Fall of Joe McCarthy. Chris, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much, Michael.
Chris, what first got you interested in doing a paper about the relationship between Dwight Eisenhower and Joe McCarthy?
I was born in New Jersey, and I lived in the area where this initially started at Fort Monmouth. And I always wanted to write something about this case. I had an elementary school teacher, his name was Mr. Thomas, who I believe used to work at Fort Monmouth and was blacklisted. And I always wanted to follow exactly what happened, and this always captivated me. And since I was teaching at Fort Hays State University and traveling between Topeka and Hays, Kansas, I'd always pass Abilene, and I said, well, someday I'll stop there and do some research on the McCarthy case. And that's how it all started.
This particular paper, I understand it started with a trip to the Eisenhower Library?
Correct. In 1997-98, I took a group of students, undergraduates and some graduate students, for an overnighter to work at the Eisenhower Library. And before I went, I made contact with the archivists, and I asked one of the archivists, I would like to work on McCarthy and Eisenhower. And they said, well, one archivist told me, he said, every historian has worked this field, and there's nothing new that you'll discover. And I said, okay. And I went, and I kept digging and digging and digging, and I found there was some stuff that was left out of the historical narrative.
Your paper goes into a fair amount of detail about some of the stuff that was left out, but for the viewers, could you just tell us briefly what were some of the things you learned that are not part of the conventional wisdom about this story?
You know, many people have speculated the role that Eisenhower played, and he did. He played a key role. His role is known as the hidden hand presidency. Professor Greenstein at Princeton University raised some of these points, and I wanted to see if his thesis about the hidden hand view of Eisenhower's administration was true, and I did. And what you find by looking at this is that Eisenhower was a much more savvy politician and political operative than many people have led to believe.
And how did Eisenhower deal with McCarthy?
He did it behind the scenes. He used methods that we maybe associate with Richard Nixon and Watergate, but he wasn't caught. He had a loyal following of administrative officials that would fall on their swords for Dwight Eisenhower, and Richard Nixon never had such individuals.
Why do you think Eisenhower decided to deal with McCarthy in this way rather than confronting him publicly?
I think he realized the dangers that McCarthy posed to American democracy. From my examination of the documents, John Foster Dulles, Eisenhower's Secretary of State, one time during a National Security Council briefing, mentioned that many Europeans thought that McCarthy was a fascist. And we all know what Eisenhower allegedly said, or well, he did actually say it, I won't get in the gutter with this guy. Well, he wouldn't get in the gutter with this guy, but he would use his officials to get in the gutter with this guy, particularly a fellow named Fred Seaton. And Seaton ran the operation from the Pentagon. What people didn't know was that Joe McCarthy may have had access to information from the Venona Project, which is a highly classified effort to decrypt and decode Soviet KGB messages beginning in 1943. And at one point in I think it was late September, maybe early October 1953, Roy Cohn called the Defense Department and said he would like to have access to a General Reichelderfer, Harry Reichelderfer, who was in charge of the Army Security Agency. And that set off alarm bells in the Eisenhower administration. And that was the key that really got him going.
And getting back to you, how long did you spend working on this project?
I spent directly from 1997-98 all the way through 2013 working on this article and subsequent articles. I wrote about 4 different articles dealing with the McCarthy case. One article I'm currently working on is called In the Shadow of Fort Monmouth, dealing with how I came up on the information. But I'd like to mention something too. I was born and raised in New Jersey. I lived not far from Fort Monmouth, where the initial investigation actually happened. I did my basic training when I was drafted into the U.S. Army at Fort Dix, where G. David Shine, Roy Cohn's personal friend, did his basic training, which instigated this whole thing. Yeah. And I also did advanced individual training at Camp McCoy, not Camp McCoy, Camp or Fort Gordon, Georgia, where I did my advanced individual training as an MP, which Roy Cohn's friend, G. David Shine, also did.
And I know you probably can't do justice to it in this short video, but just briefly to pique the viewer's interest, what was the Fort Monmouth investigation?
The Fort Monmouth investigation was a complaint that Julius Rosenberg, one of the atomic spies, one of 2, that was executed as a result of passing atomic secrets to the Soviets, worked at Fort Monmouth. And there were additional Soviet spies that were there. There were allegations made that the place leaked like a sieve. And one individual contacted Joe McCarthy and said classified information was being passed on to the Soviets. And he volunteered the information. Matter of fact, Dwight Eisenhower actually met the individual that instigated the whole problem. And when he interviewed him in the White House, this was supposed to be off the record, he was incredulous. Eisenhower was incredulous when the fellow said you couldn't even trust Matthew B. Ridgway because he was a threat to American security because he may be a secret communist. And I thought this was insane. Eisenhower felt it was insane. Shortly after that meeting, he met with Allen Dulles, the chief of the CIA, and his legal team and his national security experts.
And would you say that was the beginning of the end of McCarthy?
It was the beginning of the end. They worked very closely with the Watkins Commission special committee to censure Joe McCarthy. Information was passed on. Frank Carlson, who was a senator from Kansas, a man that was instrumental in getting Dwight Eisenhower the Republican nomination, flew repeatedly from Kansas to Washington and back with Eisenhower. It's incredulous that they didn't talk about the case. Arthur Watkins' wife arranged an initial meeting, called the White House, and that's something I'd like to mention too, is that I went and looked at the telephone notes, people that called the White House, and you could see Watkins' wife contact Eisenhower and arrange the meeting for her husband, and it was incredulous. I mean, I was amazed at what I found. Matter of fact, I was told by some archivists up there that I was one of the first scholars that ever looked at the telephone notes.
And what projects are you working on now?
Well, right now I'm finishing up a project dealing with eugenics at the State Historical Society, and it's close to my heart. I'm dealing with women that were incarcerated for having venereal disease and how they were treated from 1918 through 1956.
Dr. Lovett, thank you very much for giving us some of your time today. The full text of Dr. Lovett's article on the side of angels is available for free online in the latest Emporia State Research Studies.